9/11. When these horrible men took those airplanes and plowed them into U.S. assets and took thousands of American lives and brought down the World Trade Center buildings and crashed into the Pentagon and took another plane that passengers on the plane courageously crashed before they could do their evil deed, whatever it was, the White House, whatever they had in mind. I pretty much, you see, believe that it came down the way it seemed to come down. Occam's razor, the most likely thing seems to be true. We know the planes hit the buildings. I know anyway. It's my belief that they really hit the buildings. It's my belief that the President of these United States, George Bush, or any other president that I've known, even Dick Nixon, would never order thousands of their own citizens killed in such a horrible attack on America. I don't for 1 second, not 1 second, do I believe any of it. And oh, baby, have I taken grief for that position. Let me read you a few emails that have come in the last, few days. Okay? This is from Lon C. in Florida. Lon C. says, "Hey, Art, why won't you talk about 9/11? Art, who bought you out? Or are you just another mindless government mouthpiece? How come you're not answering the 10 questions sent to you by Victor Thrawn? How many times have you read a piece entitled 25 Rules of Disinformation? You keep being the poster boy for the New World Order. People like you and the other neocons in the mainstream media make me sick. Wake up, Art, and take off the rose-colored glasses. 9/11 was an inside job." Lon C. in Florida. Or this one. This is from Michael Ferreira of Wing TV, Wingnut TV, I call it. Michael Ferreira, he's been peppering me with these nasty emails for months now. He says, in this particular one that came tonight, he says, "Art, you're a traitor. You're a coward. You're a sellout of America. Defend yourself, traitor." That's what Michael says to me most times when he writes. Stuff like that. Doesn't go beyond that usually. "You're a traitor. You're a coward. You're a sellout of America. Defend yourself, traitor." Or how about this from Penny? Penny says, "The fires of hell are made to roast lying whores like you." Art, the fires of hell are made to roast lying whores like you. Let me see. This is from Jack. Jack doesn't say where he is. Jack says, "I see you're preparing to have the Popular Mechanics government disinformation," that's in parentheses, view of 9/11 on tonight. Will there be an opposing point of view, Art? I doubt it, except perhaps from the listeners. You've gone, Art, from being a pioneer to being a toady for this lying fascist neocon government. Anyone with a modicum of intelligence will realize the government's claims are lies, and that Popular Mechanics picked which claims they chose to debunk. The 9/11 Commission's report should occupy the same garbage can as the Warren Commission report. Thank God George Norrie has some courage and is not sold out. Why has your intellect and courage failed you, Art?" And then, let's see, this is Jerry. Jerry writes, "Hey, Art, since you're going to have Ben Chertoff on as a guest this Saturday, well, how about giving equal time to the other side and have Alex Jones on as a guest? George has the nerve to have him on. Do you? Better yet, why not have both Alex Jones and Ben Chertoff on at the same time and have a debate? Regards, Jerry." And then to follow that up, I got a call from our producer this afternoon who said, "Hey, Art, You're not going to believe this. Dave Von Kleist, he's another Alex Jones type. Dave Von Kleist, a publicist, has called and is wanting equal time tonight. Now, let's think about this a little bit. Alex Jones, Dave Von Kleist. Now, am I wrong here, or didn't George have Alex Jones on all by himself? Didn't he? Oh. Was there anybody there to debate him or debunk him? When Alex told his story, why no, there wasn't. Wait, he also had Dave Von Kleist on, right? All by himself, with nobody there to point out what they felt was wrong with what he was saying, right? These are two 9/11 conspiratorial researchers, right? Alex Jones, I think, is a talk show host on his own. Dave Van Kleist, anyway, 9/11 in plain sight. So they've both been on all by themselves, I do believe. Is that not true? Why? Yes, of course it is. And so why in heaven's name would I be required to have somebody on to argue with my guest tonight who's got his point of view? I'm just curious about that. I got so many emails saying, well, you can have him on without having somebody to say the other side of the story? You mean the other side of the story hasn't been told on this program? Gee, where have you folks been? You know it has. Why do they still maintain that it was some sort of missile and that this plane somehow mysteriously disappeared? And then I think there is another theory that all the people were shepherded who would have been on these planes into some other plane to be killed, American citizens. Isn't there something like that?
Yeah, it's called the bumble plane theory. We didn't so much get into that. The idea is that there are different takes on this, that it was at Newburgh, that it was at Otis Air Force. There are all sorts of different Air Force bases that are cited, that there's a point where two of the flight paths cross each other. So the idea is that there they landed, they herded all the passengers onto Flight 93, and then Flight 93 was shot down to destroy that evidence because there's this sort of perceived conspiracy about the lack of the planes being completely filled. Of course, that's a normal occurrence in airlines, but taken out of context, it's used as evidence that this was all planned from beginning, so they could fit everyone on to Flight 93.
I hear you. The World Trade Center Building 7. Now, that one seemed strange to me at the time a little bit. I didn't understand the whole thing either. I mean, the two buildings came down, and then later another building came down that wasn't hit by an airplane. They make a big deal out of that, right?
Right, and that seems to be the one that at the end they'll say, well, okay, fine, all the other stuff, whatever, but you have to admit that the World Trade Center 7 was brought down with a controlled demolition. A lot of that stems from the FEMA report because the Federal Emergency Management Agency didn't have much time to spend on World Trade Center 7, and they didn't do much investigating into it. Of course, National Institute of Standards and Technology is now working on that, and we were able to talk to their researchers about what they believe happened.
And?
Well, it turns out that the damage to the building facade, and they were able to piece this together from the evidence that was collected from Ground Zero. Of course, that is indeed another conspiracy in itself, that all the steel was shipped overseas immediately afterwards. Of course, most of the steel was. You had two buildings worth of steel, but a lot of it was collected as evidence. Small pieces of it. You don't need all the steel to make your to do your investigation. What happened was with World Trade Center 7, when the North Tower collapsed, an enormous amount of debris fell on the building itself and actually scooped out upwards of 25% of the south facade. And of course, I'm sorry?
I just said, my God, that's already documented visually at this point?
Well, there aren't many photos of the south facade, which is the problem, because that was below where the World Trade Center was, and most of Lower Manhattan was uninhabitable. You just couldn't get down there at that point. But they were able to piece together that 25% of it was knocked out. And of course, World Trade Center 7 itself was an unusual design. It had these massive open floors, so you had many, many thousands of square feet of office space without load-bearing columns in between them. There were fewer columns carrying load, and so knocking out a couple of those really destabilized the entire building. And as you watch these videos of the building, you can see, and NIST was able to chart exactly how the collapse happened. Some of the interior portions on the eastern south face of the building were knocked out. Of course, a fire raged in there for 7 hours. Most of it fed from a pressurized diesel line from the basement, which was not available to the FEMA investigators. They didn't know about this.
So that just fed the fire.
Exactly. So
hour after hour.
For 7 hours. And so you have one of the structural columns of the building on the east side breaks down, and you can actually see before it collapses. When you look at some of the photographs on the video footage, and this is what NIST did extensively, you can see that the penthouse drops away, and they disappear into the structure one after another. And then you see the building starting to fall from that east side of the structure. That falls first, and then that pulls down the west side of the structure.
All right, the F-16 pilot, somebody supposedly, I guess Alex Jones, supposedly interviewed a pilot who claimed that he shot down, or that he knew somebody, he interviewed somebody who said he knew somebody who shot down Flight 93. Is that correct? That
is. And, to Alex Jones's credit, he had a follow-up article on this, and he wasn't sure if this was true, but it got repeated all over the Internet. The first time it appeared was on the Alex Jones show with this retired Army colonel who said that he had met the guy who shot down Flight 93. And then eventually it came out on letsroll911.org that they named the pilot, and they named him as Major Rick Gibney. And Rick Gibney is actually Lieutenant Colonel Rick Gibney, and he is
not a major at all.
Not a major,
Colonel. Okay.
He flies out of North Dakota, out of the 119th Air National Guard, and of course, what is a National Guard pilot from North Dakota doing out in Pennsylvania shooting down Flight 93? Well, the 119th maintains a detachment at Langley, and those jets that were launched and scrambled that day actually were flying from the 119th. But we went back to the 119th and talked to them and talked to Lieutenant Gibney and talked to their press people there and went through their records. And it turns out, none of their planes got anywhere near Flight 93 because they were in a combat radius air combat patrol over Washington.
Yes.
And Rick Gibney, that morning, Ed Jacoby, who was the then director of the New York State Emergency Management Office, was out in Bozeman, Montana for a meeting of emergency managers. He's the guy you need in New York because you've got an emergency going on, and it was his job to coordinate the relief effort at Ground Zero.
Ben?
Yep.
Hold tight. We're at the bottom of the hour. Look, we could go on and on and on and on, but we don't have the time. I want to discuss a little bit the people that are making these claims. Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously, in the course of doing this story, when it became known that you were doing this story, I'm sure, I read some emails at the beginning of the program, just a little tiny sample of what's been sent to me. These are really rabid folks, and they call names, very serious, bad names, like traitor. They use names like that, and I wonder if in the course of this investigation, or even after the article came out, you have suffered the same sort of thing.
Well, I'll tell you, most of it has been after the article came out. We're pretty overwhelmed by the response. In fact, before it even hit the stands, we were getting only a couple of issues had gone out to subscribers. We were getting, the internet traffic was pretty intense. They were debunking the Popular Mechanics story, and we also got at one point, I think it was about an email a minute, and we've gotten well over 500, probably closer to 1,000 emails. And it's, to everyone who did write an email, we are going to try to respond to them. But the problem is we just have so many. We're trying to work through them.
How many of them were like the stuff that I was reading?
I would say in the initial blast of emails, and this is before the story was out, and I think this is before many people had actually read it, most of them were pretty negative and pretty mean. And the irony was, a lot of them threw back the same stuff that we had just gone through and debunked. I mean, we get these emails from people who would say, well, what about jet fuel? It doesn't burn hot enough to melt steel. And you'd sit and kind of slap yourself.
Been covered, hey.
Yeah, and say, well, I guess you guys didn't read it yet. So some of it was a knee-jerk response. Others were sort of long, in-depth letters saying, well, okay, you guys answered these 16 claims. Well, what about these 52 other?
All right. Have there been any other significant claims made since the article that ought to be addressed? We were actually thinking of doing a follow-up to this because a lot of the emails and letters and websites and responses said, well, you didn't address so-and-so. And the point of our article wasn't to retell the story of 9/11. It wasn't to tell the whole story at all. Right.
The point was to take what we saw as the claims that were getting repeated the most and to put them up to what they wanted, which was serious, mainstream media attention and actually, an actual investigation into it. So that's what we did. There are new claims coming in every day, and we are thinking of doing a follow-up where I'm not sure if we are going to be able to do that. I think it'd be a lot of fun to do that and look at some more. But I'll tell you, going through 16 of these and having all of them fall apart pretty quickly and turn out to be false, it sort of says something about probably what the rest of them are going to be.
What about the vitriolic nature of these, so many of these people involved in this? I mean, it's beyond the pale. I mean, what a lot of them are saying is just beyond the pale. It's incredible to me. I've never quite seen anything like it. They're so wrapped up in this. And I guess they believe that their own government really would do this to them. I think it's an amazing thing. I really do. And I'm not naive, and I don't think our government's perfect, and they've probably done some nasty stuff in the past, but, I mean, on this scale, no, I don't think so. And it's very vitriolic. You have any thoughts on why it's so intense?
I don't know necessarily why it's so intense, and it is so angry. I mean, there's just this massive hatred of the government. And what I found fascinating, though, is that it was from not only that a lot of the we got picked up by a couple of blogs when this came out. Instapundit linked to us, and a lot of the sort of right-wing blogosphere, so to speak, made the point that this is the loony left, that was making all these claims. And when you actually look at it and you see who's making them, it is very loud on the sort of far left wing of the political spectrum, but also on the far right wing.
Isn't that interesting?
It's wild, and there's this point at which they sort of back each other up, and they have different. They both have this agenda of absolute hatred for either the government or the administration or all administrations, and sort of any way, the way I feel, or the way that we've kind of come to the conclusion that any way to badmouth this administration is okay, because I think to a certain extent the mindset is, well, the government lies to us, so it's okay to lie about them. And, everyone has a right to be angry about 9/11. I mean, it was an absolutely tragic day, and there's no doubt that mistakes were made, and that there's a lot of work to be done to make sure that that doesn't happen again. Everyone has a right to be mad about it, and everyone has a right to ask questions. But in so doing, everyone also has a responsibility to make to have a respect for the truth and to make the right questions and to not make this echo chamber of what are sometimes misrepresentations and sometimes outright lies.
I bet you got an awful lot of emails saying you had sold out, you were part of the government official line, and that's all you are, is government mouthpiece, right?
We have been claimed we are on the Pentagon payroll. We're apparently they say that we're on the CIA payroll. That we are just a mouthpiece for the administration. And the thing was, Our story was very apolitical. I mean, we didn't look at this from a political standpoint. We just went into the actual physical claim.
The hardware part of it, yeah.
Exactly, which is really our expertise. We don't need or want to get into the politics behind it, because that's not really what this is about. This is about the actual physical evidence that a lot of these sites were citing. And what's also fascinating is David Corn, who's a writer for The Nation. Amidst all this, we had this great response from sort of centrist right wing of the political spectrum and the centrist left wing of the political spectrum. David Corn, who writes for The Nation, has also apparently been called a CIA plant by some of the 9/11 skeptics movement, and so he wrote a nice piece about how now Popular Mechanics and David Corn is represented as part of the CIA, and to a certain extent, these theories are counterproductive for actually getting to the meat of what went wrong that day, because they distract everyone's attention, and it's this massive outpouring of energy, and it's misdirected.
What was the craziest theory that you found out there?
Oh, wow. There are plenty of them. The Bumble planes one was one of the weirder ones, that the planes were switched, and that there was this that one of them was all the planes landed in one spot, and then they loaded all the passengers onto Flight 93 and shot it down. Another one was that the World Trade Center was emitting a radio beacon, and that in downtown New York there were radio and power outages that morning because of this radio beacon that was homing in these planes. That there were no passengers aboard the planes at all.
Homing in the planes.
Planes were completely remote controlled, which it speaks to a certain naivete about how airplanes work to a certain extent. That people look and they say, well, Global Hawk, the technology of Global Hawk, the unmanned drone, they can make a Global Hawk fly. Why couldn't they just slap that technology into what looks like a Boeing 767, have no passengers on board at all, and fly that in, fill it with explosives or what have you? There are levels of inherent complicity from everybody in the government. I mean, to make these plans work, you'd have to have thousands and thousands of people in on it.
Yeah, I'll say.
And that's just ludicrous when you think.
I know. Do you have any hope whatsoever? I mean, the article is now published. Do you think that in your lifetime or my lifetime or anybody who's listening right now, lifetimes, that the facts will finally be accepted as the real way it happened? Or do you think this will go on forever, or at least until we wipe ourselves off the face of the globe?
I don't know. That's a very good question. To a certain extent, it's getting louder. All this ballyhoo about there being an inside job here. But
yes.
I think in the mainstream, when you talk to people who actually were there, who have firsthand knowledge, I mean, that was our strategy for reporting this, was to get as close to firsthand knowledge as we possibly could. I mean, there's not even a second thought that there's any possibility that these theories could be true. And so, I think it would take a much better effort and much better evidence and some real truth, which just isn't there to throw this really into the mainstream, even though it is sort of trickling in there. If you're going to, it's fine to be angry about this, but to continue to repeat things that are just plain wrong, that you ignore because of your own politics, you're not really serving your own cause. And I think that's, I just can't see it continuing forever like that.
Well, I wish I could agree with you, but looking at other things that perhaps are near this magnitude, assassinations and other things. The moon.
That one's still there, isn't it?
Lots of people who don't think we ever went to the moon. Let me go to the phones. I really do want to let the audience ask their questions. I think it's important, so let's do it. First-time caller line, you're on the air with Ben Chertoff. Hi.
Hello?
Hi. You're on
Hi,
the
how
air
you doing?
with Ben Chertoff. Hi.
Hi, I want to ask him the question. He had alluded to how all the people were supposedly corralled into the one plane and that their cell phone conversations were voiced over. I want to know the technical complexity of that, because these were not famous people. They were anonymous people, and the time frame that it would take to be able to do that.
Well, no, wait a minute. Ben has not said that's what happened, sir.
No, he didn't say it. He had just talked about one of the crazy theories out there.
That's one of them.
Right, and I was just wondering how technically, from a technical standpoint of view, would it be to get somebody's voice on a cell phone and then splice together a conversation with their loved ones to convince their loved ones that this was the actual person.
Sir, is that what you believe happened?
No, I don't.
You don't. So you
I just want him to debunk that theory by saying...
I see. All right. Mm-hmm. Ben?
Well, I'll tell you, we didn't look into that. I actually haven't really heard that one specifically, but I imagine it would take a lot of people to do that, and B, you'd have to somehow get the recordings beforehand, so that you have some sort of baseline comparison, and then to get that done that day, transmitted as it's going on, because of course these calls happen real time, would take a pretty Herculean effort, and it's almost impossible.
Yeah.
I mean, you can do a pretty good job of splicing together somebody's voice and making a conversation, but you can always tell when it's faked, and especially a loved one. I mean,
right.
that would be really tough.
Right.
All right, sir.
That's it. Thank you for having the show.
You're very welcome. West of the Rockies, you're on the air with Ben Chertoff. Hi.
Hey, how are you gentlemen doing?
All right, sir. Welcome.
Mark from Henderson, Nevada, I think.
Yes, Mark.
I read the piece that Mr. Chertoff wrote, and I want to say, I didn't really see any empirical evidence that would disprove that the government was complicit in 9/11. And one thing about the methodology that I noticed is it's like you take these particular theories that people have, take, for example, the no planes theory at the Pentagon, and try to deconstruct that. And the fact of the matter is you can prove that a plane flew into the Pentagon, but that still does not disprove that the government was complicit in 9/11.
That's right. You're absolutely right. It doesn't. But you do acknowledge, unlike most, that a plane did fly into it?
I don't know.
I don't know. Well, then what about the pieces of the plane, the burning bodies, the whole thing, the eyewitnesses? What about all that?
To be honest, I mean, you look at the record of this government, I don't think we can believe anything.
You're not answering my question. Don't talk about the record of the government. Talk about the pieces of the plane, sir. Eyewitnesses and the burning bodies and all that. Eyewitnesses to all of that.
I haven't seen any of that. This is the most surveilled corridor in the world, and all they have is a little Logitech webcam shot of the Pentagon. Why don't they show us the video footage? I'm sure they would have some sort of video footage.
All right, Ben, that's a good question. Why there has been some sort of refusal? Is there video footage that exists that's being held from us?
Well, I'll tell you, we didn't investigate that completely. In fact, we didn't really work on that at all. We might think about doing that in a follow-up article, and it's certainly something we'll...
Okay, so that would be on the list.
Yeah, probably it would be, because that one seems to be out there quite a bit. I'll tell you, a lot of the information about what hit the Pentagon, in fact, all of this stuff, because it's a criminal investigation, and this is standard procedure with just about any time there's a criminal action in terms of a transportation accident, the FBI takes over. And the FBI, and having dealt with other cases and in completely separate incidents, reporting during a criminal investigation, they are very reluctant to release anything, because this is their case, and they want to be able to go and prosecute and have a clean case. They don't want the media attention that's going to, the sort of the media making their own conclusions and people making their own conclusions themselves after reading the media. So it's very tough, and the government has been criticized quite a bit for not releasing enough information. This was a very big incident. I think that might be, personally, I think it would be nice if we could get these, if there is video, if we could see it. But to be perfectly honest, that's pretty much standard operating procedure. And beyond that, there's just mountains of evidence to prove that a plane did hit the Pentagon, and there's very little, in fact, nothing that I've seen to say anything to the contrary. I mean, in terms of empirical evidence.
Do you feel that these 9/11 conspiratorial people might be able to make finally enough noise that the government would politically be forced, would have their hand forced into releasing some of what they have not yet?
Maybe. I think they'd have to convince a lot of the sort of less prone to believing these conspiracy theories. They'd have to come up with a lot more and probably better arguments, since a lot of these really do fall through. But I don't think I don't think necessarily we will even need to, because in all likelihood these trials are probably going to be over, in the next couple of years, and this stuff will come out in the process of doing that.
What about those who say that there weren't any hijackers on the planes, and they feel there's evidence indicating they weren't even there, and that they're still out there alive somewhere today? You've heard that?
Yeah, we also didn't look into that too much because that just seems so implausible from the very start.
East of the Rockies, you're on there with Ben Chertoff. Hi.
Hi, I really feel privileged to be able to speak on the radio tonight. I want to ask about the PBS documentary that was shown on 911 in plain sight, where Mr. Silverstein, who is the owner of the Twin Towers, said that he had on building number 7 pulled, which is parlance for set with charges and explosives, and demolished on the very day of 9/11, less than 8 hours after the attacks occurred. Now, doesn't it take days or even weeks to set charges? So that would say to me that this has been planned for a long time in advance.
Ben?
Well, actually, to set up a controlled demolition, it can take, especially for buildings that size, it takes years sometimes. Then they have to pull out all the support structures inside. They essentially clean out the office. You got to run wiring over the entire thing. You can't do it wirelessly because there's just too many signals to these charges. But I'm glad somebody brought up the Larry Silverstein comment, because we certainly looked at that, and that's a pretty simple one. If you watch the documentary again, what he says is they decided to pull, which is referring to the fire department. And of course, in some circles of the controlled demolition industry, pull is used to mean that you actually demolish a building. Mm-hmm. But of course, talk to any firefighter. Walk down the block, talk to a firefighter, ask them what it means when you're in a building and you pull. There are two things, and we did this, of course. There are two things pull mean to a firefighter. It means you can pull hoses out of a truck, mm-hmm. or it means you evacuate a building, because mm-hmm. it's probably going to collapse because it's dangerous. So when they made the decision to pull, they literally made the decision to leave the building, which they did.
So they were saying, get out, she's not structurally stable, and they're going to go.
Exactly.
So that's what they meant by pull.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very simple explanation, and it's the one that's true.
All right, Ben, there were a number of statements made by structural engineers and some others that were misused by the conspiracy folks, weren't there, to the point
Absolutely.
Where some of these people felt like they've had their lives ruined?
Yes, absolutely. And we, when I think what you're talking about specifically, and this is the one that made it into press, and this certainly wasn't the only instance we found of this,
right,
was a man named Van Romero, who works out at the New Mexico Institute of Mining and Technology. He was interviewed by the Albuquerque Journal. I believe it was on 9/11 itself. He was interviewed, and he had. It was printed that he said, "quote, there were some explosive devices inside the buildings that caused its collapse," and that he said that essentially that the collapse of the structures resembled those of controlled implosions.
Resembled those of controlled,
exactly.
Yes.
Old structures. Well, soon we talked to Van Romero at length, and he mentioned to us that soon after that hit the stands, he realized that wasn't exactly what he said. And what he had said that day, and this is just from watching it on television, he wasn't there. He was halfway across the country. What he said was, it looked like controlled demolition.
Which is exactly what you told me earlier in the program about the puffs of dust, right?
Exactly. I mean, you can look at that and say, well, yeah, it kind of looks like explosions. Of course, they're a lot bigger than what you would see in a controlled demolition because you actually want the explosive force going into the building and not out the windows. But what happened with Van Romero is he called up the paper and he asked for a retraction, and he got one. It was printed, I believe it was a week or two later. Of course, many of the sites just put the initial article up.
Not the retraction.
They don't print the retraction.
That's normal.
This is what was even more fascinating, and Mr. Romero went into this with us. Some sites actually claimed that he had been gotten to. The powers that be
got to him.
Yeah, exactly, and told him to change his story. But of course he said to us, he has no doubt, absolutely no doubt that the Trade Center and World Trade Center 7 fell because of sort of the mainstream view that it was damaged from the planes and from the fires. And he absolutely doesn't think for a second that there were any controlled shaped charges in the building.
All right. West of the Rockies, you're on the air with Ben Chertoff. Hi.
Yeah, hi, guys. Great show. I was just wondering, how do you get in a plane, a full-size airliner, to go through a 16-foot hole in a Pentagon without clipping a wing or dragging an engine into the surrounding lawns or knocking over lamp standers on the highway? It seems that the plane evaporated and there were no wing damage or tail segments or luggage or seating or anything visible, including on that website, letsroll911.org. It's very, very informative. I was just wondering what you had to say about that.
Well, first of all, the 16-foot hole that's quoted all over, and it was also quoted in Thierry Maison.
Yeah, before the roof collapsed.
Right. The only 16-foot hole was on Ring C, and that was an exit hole from the landing gear, according to Mette Sozen, who had studied this with ASCII, who did the building performance report. And there was the problem, and I think the reason why this speculation was kind of able to run out of control like it has, is because there aren't that many pictures available before.
How do you get level wings, that level, that close to the ground, without dragging a cowling or an engine or a portion of that aircraft right through that whole lawn section? And
well, there were.
Leaving fuel burning. There's no fuel burns on that lawn except for about the first 25 feet from the building.
Right, well, you have to realize that this stuff is moving at 580 miles an hour.
Yeah, but it's compressing against the wall of the
building.
Right,
so what happens is it goes into the building, and they've done computer simulations of this at length, and you can see exactly where the fuel goes. And it enters the building in a liquid state. There were skid and burn marks on the lawn, and unfortunately, by the time most of the pictures were out, the section of the Pentagon in question had already collapsed.
Jamie McIntyre for CNN was right there live, stating there was no significant wreckage of any sizable aircraft.
Right, there wasn't, which is
How's that?
What you would expect when a plane is very thin aluminum and the thing was going extremely quickly and it's hitting reinforced concrete. The energy involved is enormous.
What about the lamp standards given the altitude of the structure, the first floor being the major impact site, the lamp standards on the highway not more than, say, 40 yards from the building? How do you get a plane to do a left turn nose into a building?
To be perfectly honest, we didn't deal with the lamp stands. That's something that we might look at.
Seems like that's the way you're doing the whole show here. You're not dealing with a lot of connecting dots here.
Well, our purpose in doing this, and I think I've said this before, but our purpose was not to tell the complete story. And what we did was we took what was repeated often. The lampstand one I've seen now since, but it's not one that's repeated very often. And I'll tell you that the highway is actually many hundreds of yards away from the Pentagon, and when the plane flew in, it didn't just hit the first story. Of course, it hit the first, second, and I believe part of the third story, and that was all documented from evidence that they recovered soon thereafter.
So that's another one that if you were to do a follow-up might be worthy of exploration?
Sure, yeah. I mean, unfortunately, I don't have in front of me what the flight path of the plane was, so I can't say.
Is it believed that it hit about 25 feet in front of the impact of the building? Is that about where it hit?
Yeah, part of the plane, part of the fuselage, and part of the wing. And, of course, when you've got a piece of very fragile aluminum moving at that speed, like an airplane, it breaks up. I mean, it literally shreds. And you see this in many other plane crashes. I mean, it's not just the plane crash at the Pentagon. I mean, remember ValueJet that went down in Florida? I mean,
yes.
There's almost nothing left. And think of Flight 93 in Shanksville. I mean, there's a perfect example. The thing buried itself, over 30 feet underground, and all that was left, and there was a massive explosion when it hit the ground, were these tiny scraps of metal, because the energy involved is enormous. I mean, it's many tons. It's equal to the energy of a plane hitting something solid is equal to many tons of TNT. And it's something that, I mean, I think there's a very Hollywood interpretation of what a plane crash is going to look like, because it's not something that we see every day, thank God.
Let's come up with one that's going to put you right back where you belong.
Great.
He says, Art, conspiracy proven. Under Windows 95 Word program, set font to Windings, plug in QNY22, the tail of Flight 11, and see what symbols you see. This program was made in 1995. Have you seen that?
I have. I love those. I mean, that's like one of the ones that came out right afterwards. I mean,
I know.
I mean, there's no conspiracy there, but it's really funny. And of course, that doesn't work if you actually try it. I don't think it works. I haven't tried it.
Well, then there's somebody else here who says, "Look, great program, but sorry, I like conspiracies too much." Maybe there's some truth in that. You know,
well, they're fun. You know, I loved reading around this stuff, but I mean, just this 9/11 stuff.
Yeah, this is 9/11. This isn't fun.
And yeah, and these are not your normal conspiracy. I mean, this is just too much, and there's too much evidence to the contrary to really make these work.
That's right. First-time caller line. Your turn with Ben Chertoff. Hello.
Hi there, Art. I'm a first-time caller. I've been listening to you for, I don't know, probably going on like 9 years now.
Okay.
I was compelled to call tonight because I really have to take issue with your guest and how he accuses others of sloppy journalism.
Okay.
When,
all right. Well, be specific.
Well, first of all, the NTSB, according to them, none of the 4 crashes were given a normal investigation. Jurisdiction was handed over to the FBI. So when he says the NTSB didn't find anything, he's not lying. That he's, saying a mistruth. And that's what a lot of what I noticed with your guest is a lot of it. He's not lying. He's not directly doing anything wrong. He's just brushing off and skipping over a lot of things. I mean,
so
why were there only...
All right, hold it. Let's get this straight. You're saying the NTSB was bypassed and the FBI took over the investigation, so of course the NTSB didn't find anything. Is that what you just said?
Well, supposedly, normally when that happens, and that's never happened, but normally when that happens, if jurisdiction is needed to be given over to the FBI, then the NTSB is still supposed to be involved, and they weren't involved.
Okay, Ben?
So that's why they didn't find anything.
Well, hold on now. Ben?
Well, first of all, I'm not exactly sure where you're referring to our NTSB findings. I mean, it's probably over in the Flight 93 stuff, and they were on scene for quite a while going through the wreckage.
Yes.
And it is standard operating procedure when there is a criminal act having to do with our transportation system that the FBI will claim jurisdiction over that and will control it. I mean, they will work with the NTSB, but the FBI is in control. Now, we were able to talk to some of the NTSB guys who were on scene and able to tell us what they found there. But, I mean, I don't know if you remember the train crash. This is a great example it's a tragic example, but it's also a good example. Out in California, a couple of months ago, the guy who had driven his car...
Of course.
Onto the train tracks to commit suicide and then had second thoughts.
Yes.
That investigation was immediately handed over to the FBI because it was a criminal investigation. And, I mean, that's just how it works. There's nothing fishy going on, but unfortunately, for people who are convinced that there's something not true out there and require all the evidence, and I really think for some of these diehard conspiracy theories, it doesn't matter how much evidence you show them.
That's kind of what I've been telling you all night, really,
Yeah, I mean,
in a lot of ways.
The conspiracy is still going to be there, but the FBI just doesn't release everything right away, and you have to wait till the trial's over for it to happen. I mean, even the NTSB is like that, and I worked with them on a number of different stories. It takes a while for them to come out and say exactly what they found because they're still conducting their investigation.
All right. East of the Rockies, you're on the air with Ben Chertoff. Hello.
Hello, Art.
Hi.
Hello, Ben. This is Travis from Richmond, Kentucky. And I agree with you 100% on talking about the planes, how they hit the World Towers and the Pentagon. I don't think that's really an important issue from the standpoint of what is the crime.
Well, it's only important, sir, because so many of these conspiracy guys are saying it didn't happen.
Well, I know, but I have some other questions that,
go ahead.
Aren't answered by either side of that.
That's fine. That's fine. Go ahead.
Okay. My angle starts with the before 9/11 knowledge, who had knowledge, and so on and so forth. We'll start with Willie Brown. Mayor of San Francisco got a phone call the day before. I heard him say that at the pulpit, University Cathedral in Los Angeles with Dr. Gene Scott in November of 2003.
Dr. Scott, rest his soul. Now, this phone call said what? All this was going to happen?
Willie Brown got a phone call that said, don't fly to New York.
Don't fly to New York.
Right.
Okay.
And now I've read some other articles that said that there were a couple of officials that canceled their flights also on the 10th. The Attorney General began flying non-commercial several weeks before 9/11.
All right, let's deal with all of that. Were there any important evidences that you uncovered anywhere along the line, Ben, that people had warning that this was going to happen, indicating a prior knowledge?
Well, I'll tell you, this is outside of the scope of what we worked on, specifically on this article. But I think you'll see, especially, and I think the story of September 11th will probably be one, at least in the government, in the lead up to it, as a total breakdown in security. And it does look like there were certainly the clues there from what I've read, and this is not speaking to the story we did or our investigation, because this is really quite far outside of that scope. We really stuck to the physical claims. But I think what we've seen in both the 9/11 report and what's come out in the papers and the news and the sort of Richard Clark reports is that there were at least the clues there and the warnings. And I think what you take away from it is that before September 11th there was a major communication breakdown in the federal government. Now, whether people actually had foreknowledge that it was going to happen on that day, I can't say yes or no because I haven't.
I remember some stories almost immediately after the event, indicating that there had been some stocks dumped. There was a big dump that went on, and that story was short-lived, really. It sort of went away. You have anything on that at all?
Yeah, we didn't really investigate that in depth at all, but we did. I mean, it's certainly something that we came across, and that's been coming in emails quite a bit. Mm-hmm. The story there is that there were put options put on American Airlines and United Airlines stock before 9/11. The idea being that somebody profited from it, therefore somebody had to know. And I think the story puts it in the Chicago issue. I'm not exactly sure the specifics of the story, but
I bet the SEC's looked into it.
Yeah, what I do know is that it was investigated, and it turns out that the put options were not just American Airlines and United Airlines, as the conspiracy sites say.
Oh.
It was I think 5 or 6 different airlines, because if you go back to early September of 2001, the airlines were not in good shape to begin with, and there was a lot of talk that there was going to be a pretty big downturn in the aviation stock. There was some one of these investor newsletters came out and said, aviation is just, going bad, period. This is trending for months. I mean, this goes back months of trends, so a bunch of people dumped the stock. And then there was an actual flurry of trading, I believe, on these two airlines. But from what I've read, and this is, again, outside of the scope of what we did, that was all pretty solidly debunked well before we got into this, because the trading happened overseas. And, theoretically, the bin Laden family does have quite a bit of money, and who knows who was making those trades. But it wasn't in the U.S.
All right. West of the Rockies, you're on the air with Ben Chertoff. Hello.
Good morning, Art.
Good morning.
Hey, kudos. What a wonderful job. Thanks for bringing this fine man on your program.
You're very welcome.
And I want to thank you, Ben, for reminding. I'm a former Marine Corps veteran, Gulf War veteran, and I want to thank you for reminding us that my brothers and our American families didn't go over there just to fight over oil. And for all you callers out there, please give these men some respect here. If you can't contain your composure, pick something else up other than a phone. Now, saying that, Art, you posed an interesting question. You know, we want to find out, why do people want to believe like this? Why do we have conspiracy theorists? And why don't they want to trust our government? Now, you yourself...
Well, I'm not sure that everybody should trust the government. We should keep a very, people in our business should be keeping an eye on the government. But that doesn't mean that everything that the government does is a conspiracy against the people.
Exactly. But that is a question that does need to be addressed, as far as, that part of the process, why people are like this. And you yourself had a remarkable experience seeing some kind of a triangle craft.
Yes.
And we have the agenda, the UFO agenda, of course, and our government's not talking about. And we have the agenda of the chemtrails, our government.
All right. Well, these are all different.
So I can understand why we have this kind of a situation here. And the freedom of mobility, I think, is, the heart of the UFO matter because of the propulsion system.
All right, that's another show, sir. I appreciate your call. Thank you very much. But I'm going to keep trying to keep on track here.
Hello, is this me? I'm one of the conspirators.
Dick.
Yes.
Dick, I had to cut that out. We don't allow last names.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
So your name is Dick. We'll start over so we get it in. Your name is Dick, and
I'm one of the conspiracy theorists who was one of the very first ones who came out when the security camera video at the Pentagon was released, and that convinced me. It was a completely data-driven, my conclusions, and I've got the photographs out and put them on the internet. And I just wanted to say that the Popular Mechanics article didn't address it at all. Yet I believe it is one of the most popular, one of the most persuasive of the arguments. Basically, it's two things. The security camera video that was released shows a smaller plane. It also shows a very thick, creamy cloud of trail of which we presume is a missile because it's too thick for contrail, heading toward the Pentagon.
So you think it was a missile, not an airplane?
I believe. The scenario that I have, and Professor A.K. Dudney, who's an editor of Scientific American, the view is that the Pentagon, the 757 was there, and it flew over the Pentagon and landed at Reagan National Airport only 1 mile away beyond. The killer jet was an F-16 or some other fighter jet that is smaller and differently proportioned, and that is based not on speculation, but the proportions are based on the security camera video.
Okay, Ben.
That's based on the 5 frames of video that you see in still repeated all over again. There's one frame where you can see the plane. I mean, you're basing it on that one still, correct?
Yes.
I'll tell you what you have in there. of course, the nature of security cameras like that, to save data and to save space on whatever recording device you're using, it's not a full motion video. So you've got, I don't know how many frames per second that was, but it's fewer than 30 frames a second, probably closer to 10 or maybe even fewer than that. So you have this one shot of a blurred, completely, because of course it's not a fast shutter, so you've got this blur on the screen. You can barely see what it is, whether it's a plane, whether it's a 757, whether it's an F-16. I think there is by far enough empirical evidence to say that is, in fact, a 767.
Well, besides, it wasn't F-16 parts and pieces, or a missile from an F-16,
or a black box from an F-16.
None of that was true.
Exactly.
I mean, you may wish to believe these things, folks, but please, the facts are the facts, and, they're pretty well documented in this article. Is there any other good reading that you would recommend to people who are, the few out there that might be teetering or tottering one way or the other and haven't made up their minds?
To go beyond this?
Yes.
People, there's a lot of bad-mouthing about the 9/11 Commission report, and I certainly, I don't want to say that everything came out there as clearly as it could have. I mean, I think they did a pretty Herculean task. It was an independent commission. Go through the footnotes in the 9/11 Commission report. I mean, if you're really serious about this, because you see what they saw, and you get pointed to the actual source material. People fault the report for not having enough evidence. Well, it's all there. It's just in about 60 pages of footnotes in the back, and we certainly did our share of that among all the other reporting we had. But there's a lot of stuff in there, and it's overwhelming the amount of evidence that there is for the events played out the way most people really saw them played out.
Okay, Ben, this is a part of the show here where I have to ask now if you want to give out your home number. Listen, buddy, thank you for being on the program.